Well, good afternoon. This is a more elbow room on this room than the one that we had in the first panel. But hopefully everybody found the parking. I was a little lost, but that's just my story. Um, but I'm glad you're all able to make it. Dave obviously ordered in beautiful weather in Massachusetts on a hot summer day. Um, and welcome to the second panel. I hope you had an opportunity to get some coffee. There was some food outside, and an opportunity to meet a couple of people. I have been very fortunate in meeting a lot of people over the last several months, and I still continue to meet new folks. And it's really the process that's really exciting for me, not the destination. Hopefully, we will define the destination as we continue this process. I have a co-conspirator in form of Dave, who's agreed to, without any major twisting of arms, to be my moderator. So what I'm going to do is, like the first panel, I will set the conversation and then hand it off to Dave. And then we have all of our panelists. Thank you for making the trip out here, and get it going. Uh, as a quick reminder, for some folks, I think every session we do have some new people. I hope folks who are tuning in online are able to sort of listen in as well. Much better AV setup here than we had in the UMass Club. But I think the recording on the first one came out okay as well. So we started off this process of understanding the advanced nuclear and fusion space for the state of Massachusetts, back when the governor announced the start of the roadmap back in October 2025. We had about 2.5 months over the holidays of extensive stakeholder engagement process. Certainly, if you think about the 9 stakeholder groups that we put together and the number of people that we need to be talking to, there's no end to the number of conversations we can have. But I think every conversation adds to that opportunity for continuing that engagement process. And so we got it started in November, December, went into January and February, and now we are in the sort of the panel discussions, regional cooperation conversations. There were some suggestions already today. It'll be really interesting to have, audience in small group setting discussing what they're thinking of. And I said, yes, we had some other suggestions about roundtables and an opportunity to do, small group discussions. So we're certainly looking for modalities of continuous engagement as we continue to get input from folks just like yourselves. So in a nutshell, we've been, in a very rapid learning curve. The terrain globally, nationally, and within the region is changing rapidly as far as energy demand curves and growth, nuclear technology development, and the regulatory environment itself. It's almost you can't take a vacation for a week because you come back and there's new things, which is in a way good, which means there's a vibrant community of engagement and a lot of work that is ongoing within this space. We are trying to keep an eye on that. We're trying to continue to build that information in. And I must say that I've been at UMass Lowell for 14 years. I've given many reactor tours, but I have not given more number of reactor tours in the last couple of months as a result of the roadmap engagement. So if you have not been to the UMass Lowell Research Reactor, I welcome you. Now that I have Gwen, my co-conspirator, I am more emboldened in taking on additional groups coming to campus, and we can kind of help facilitate. So our goal through the roadmap process was to sort of listen in, take note of the things that we hear from the stakeholders who come into the conversations and highlight where the critical interests are. And we sort of try to figure out a way to do gaps, sentiments, and essentials in terms of where we go. And those are some of the reasons as to where we came up with the panels. And you can see we've done various different ways of data analytics in terms of policy certainty. Public trust is a big one, safety. So we'll touch on that today. And you will notice that we have a third panel that will actually focus a lot more specifically on safety, spent fuel, and public trust and how we build that. So we started with very modest goals, around the four pillars. As we get the information, these pillars are starting to, get the paint on them. We are starting to get more information in it, and it's starting to look like a roadmap that is informed by stakeholder process, and that's what we wanted. There may be new things that we learned from you all. There are a lot of things that other states we learned from, but at the end of the day, this is a roadmap that is informed by our stakeholder engagement process, and we want to paint our colors of what that looks like. We did our preliminary findings report where we identified four things that we heard loud and clear. The appetite for continuous engagement, which could be through a state-recognized advanced nuclear and fusion hub. Leverage and align the Massachusetts' educational and nuclear workforce. A big focus of that was the first panel on ecosystem and R&D and innovation. Advanced climate leadership, winter reliability, and long-term affordability. Some of those elements will be covered in today's panel on understanding energy markets, technologies that might provide solutions, and where those pressure points are. And then, of course, understanding the state policies and regional efforts. What's really important here is to see that the governors provided a joint statement. The six governors came together and said that they would work together on the existing and new deployment strategies. And I think that's so important given the New England ISO grid, which is connected. And I think these nuclear projects, no matter where they put them, has influence with each other. So it's great to see that kind of coordination and support across. And then the discussion panels, just to kind of highlight the nuclear ecosystem, it is recorded and ported onto the webpage. The technology is the one today. And then please mark your calendar for the July 15th. That will be in Lowell, Massachusetts on safety, spent fuel, and public trust. We solicited input from the stakeholders and open submissions for panelists. We were very encouraged to get upwards of 30 recommendations. Of course, we have some fantastic panelists today. We obviously cannot get all of them, and the schedules are tight. So I want to especially thank the panelists for making the time and getting out here today, because we want to get the subject matter experts to engage in this conversation. And we will work with their schedule to make it happen. So in the defined stage where we are now, you saw this a little bit more. We're developing a matrix that allows us to understand where some of our strengths may be, specifically in terms of Massachusetts. I mentioned last time in terms of technology assessment and expertise. But today, like for instance, the energy market analysis, I think the ISO, if you're a graduate student interested in energy analysis or statistics or anything else in between, there isn't a better resource of data that you can mine as heavily as you would like. And they put out some phenomenal reports that are very informative. So we have a good capacity in terms of understanding those market data in a moderate way, and it could go further. Similarly, we're looking at other things in terms of regional coordination, market signals, and financing, and such. So in this particular case, what we are looking to do is get the information, the capabilities, and policy conditions that support Massachusetts' need in a responsible way to understand and evaluate advanced nuclear and fusion possibility within the state. Right. So that's the lens that we are using in this metric. The first panel, we are using a different lens with the same metric, and then the third one will be doing the same thing. So in this case, we are defining essentially the evaluation, the planning, and what options may be possible. And so we want to look at what the strengths are within the Commonwealth. And some of them are very obvious and clear. We obviously have the ISO New England, MIT, UMass System, MITRE, and other tremendous nonprofit organizations that are very capable in providing reliable and trustworthy data that one could look at to inform our thinking. There's a sufficient amount of policy experience in regional electric markets, clean energy procurement, and climate planning. I think the state of Massachusetts leads in this area, and one of the national leaders on pushing the climate agenda. So what kinds of enabling conditions might be necessary? I mean, we need to look at the affordability. Can the nuclear technology genuinely offer an affordable solution? What market conditions would allow that? Understand the regulatory and permitting readiness, technology assessment and monitoring, and regional coordination in neighboring states. I think cannot amplify the importance of that. I think we've heard a lot from our stakeholders on making that sort of possible. So if you start to define these things in assets, this is how we look at the columns. We're starting to look at the institutions and organizations. This is by no means an exhaustive list. And through the stakeholder process, we would welcome the opportunity to continue to engage with folks who feel that they have something to offer or have questions around technology innovation, market planning, regulations and public safety, or the broad stakeholder engagement process. We're kind of doing these exercises to understand where the capacities are and the assets are, so that we can genuinely get folks involved. So that middle slide with all the hands up, please raise your hand. We would love to come talk to you and get you engaged. So with that, what I want to hand off to Dave Flanagan, who's at UMass Chan, to help us through the channel engage in a conversation and a discussion around technologies, where the technology readiness is, what's the timeline on some of the development, whether it's on advanced reactors, SMRs, fusion, what kinds of different deployment pathways might be possible, the opportunities in the markets, what are the drivers in a deregulated market, and then the regulatory environment. There's a lot going on at the federal with the NRC, multiple license review pathways within the DoD, DOE, and NRC, and really sort of start to get a handle on what technologies are closest to commercial deployment, how much market value is there for firm and carbon-free energy, and answer questions around policy and permitting challenges. So with that, I'm done. I can have my coffee and my snack, and Dave Flanagan is the moderator for the rest of the session. So I will invite you to maybe share with us how we have come to know each other in terms of your role in understanding the campus planning and how you looked at all of these things collectively, and then let you sort of introduce the panelists and move forward from there. So, okay. Thanks, Dave.
Yep, thank you, Sukesh. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to UMass Chan, your public medical school. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Restrooms are out and around the corner. If you're a fire drill, we'll take you out. There's refreshments out back. If you need anything, let me know. My staff is here. For our panelists, the microphones, you just click them up and the light will come on and you're live. We'll have somebody run out to the audience in case there are questions from the audience, so the people that are on Zoom can hear that. I'm going to introduce the panel, and a couple of panelists have brought slides. So I'm going to introduce them in the order that we've queued up the slides, and then please come up. You can walk through your slides and then take a seat at the front panel. But in answering Sukesh's question, I joined the UMass Chan almost 4 years ago and had this campus targeted for many years because I think the ingredients for this campus to be first in the nation to have an independent energy future really exist here in Worcester. We are a top 5 medical school in the country, graduate around 230 MDs a year, 75 MD PhDs, and about 125 PhDs in nursing, and have a really large basic science portfolio. Got our second Nobel Prize in 20 years last year. And we see about 1 million patients a year on this campus. So energy is really important to what we do, and continuity of operations for the medical center and the university are paramount. We treat the sickest of the sick in the region here, and so we have an obligation to our patients to make sure that we are always available when anyone, anywhere needs us. So it's a great campus to have the kind of innovation that we're talking about on what is that energy future so that we can, in fact, be here when anybody, anywhere in the world actually needs to come to us and we can try to help with their outcome. So when I joined Chan, owning our own power plant was one of these criteria that I thought gave us a lot of leverage in what the destiny of UMass Chan could be and potentially lead the country and the way of thinking about, what is the energy future? What is the transition? Especially given Governor Baker's Executive Order 594 and its timing of as we're going to make this fuel switch, what are the creative solutions that we have? So I was happy to come and take on the role of Executive Vice Chancellor here. And my role is really an operational role. If you can see it, touch it, move it, it's under my domain. I am not an MD. I just play one on TV. But so it's been, Sukesh and I started talking about what is the energy future. And I will share openly, I'm a U Lowell graduate. And so I've known about the U Lowell nuclear engineering program for more than 4 decades. So I was very interested in what Sukesh was doing at Lowell and how we might partner to explore the energy future for UMass Chan. And I think from a use case perspective, we are doing analysis of all of the options that are available to us technologically to say, what is our future? What's reliable, what's affordable, what technologies are going to be ready so that we can maintain our compliance calendar? What's our workforce look like? What does the community think about, the various technologies that we might deploy? So Sukesh has been a great partner in the technical side of it, but we're aggregating a really strong team to sort of answer these questions and then set the course forward for what the Worcester campus looks like. And, keeping in mind that we really need to make sure, first and foremost, that we have 0 interruptions to service. It's 365 days a year. Doesn't matter if it's a blizzard. We still need to take care of our patients. And so that with that obligation, our needs from an energy perspective are, I'd say, a little bit more critical than different businesses and residencies throughout the Commonwealth. So with that in mind, we're in the pursuit of answers, and we're trying to have a very objective way of thinking about how we evaluate these things to make sure that we get good input from technical, community, legislative, all of the parties. And then we'll recommend in an open process, this is the merits of our various analyses. And we're going to let, the decision be made by advantage, not by us having the thumbs on the scale saying this is what we want. So we're in this journey now, and this forum is really interesting for us to see what the inputs are and also educate us in, who should we be talking to? What should we be concerned with as we move forward? So we're on a timeline that's dictated by legislation. And we think that we're really well positioned to be able to do the diligence and answer all of the questions that are going to come up as we make this decision. So we're very, very excited to have this group here and to partner with all of you as we think through some of this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists in the order that some people have slides. Please come up. You can either work the slides through with the keyboard and then have a seat, and then we'll get going on the panel. So first, Alex Bach, Senior Advisor at the US DOE Advanced Research Projects, the ARPA-E. Alex, please. And welcome. Yeah, you can, that's on, and then you could advance either here or there.
Here we are. No, I want to go back.
There
Sorry.
you go.
There we Okay, greetings. Hello. Hi, my name's Alexander Bach. I am a lifelong Red Sox fan, so coming to Worcester to see I've been out to some Blue Sox games, but folks here Worcester should be Worcester has nothing to apologize for. It is, as many of you know, it's the second largest city in New England, and it's larger than Providence, larger than Hartford, larger than Portland. It's an amazing place, and I have a godson who just graduated from your medical school last year. He's at Chicago now and got a most amazing education, and it's an amazing place here. I am, as you see, or maybe you don't, I was at RPE, which I want to say something about RPE because it's the innovation model that is really phenomenal. It's a federal government agency set up to model after DARPA, which is the Defense. ARPA stands for Advanced Research Planning Agency, ARPA, and then we're RPE. There's a DARPA. There actually are 6 ARPAs throughout the federal government for infrastructure and health. The health one is partially based in Boston. RPE is the second one that was formed 15 years ago, and it has an annual budget of about $500 million we give out. And I was there in the Biden administration. I left on January 20th a year ago. Elections have consequences. And fortunately, RPE is a bipartisan focused place. The congressional members love it. And so its budget has stayed flat, despite Project 2025 wanting to zero it out. The larger framing question here we had is, at the end of the day, trust and cost are the things that are going to matter. If we don't resolve those things to the satisfaction both of the experts and of the public at large, you will not see a significant role for nuclear in New England. And I really think we should think of this as a regional approach. And from a federal perspective, it has the wonderful regional approach that we have 12 U.S. senators, in the New England region. We have 25 members of Congress. So both our local folks, but the region is a really important way to think about this as a resource. And nuclear also has the great benefit of being a bipartisan thing at the moment. That has not been true. It is true. 2 years ago, the ADVANCE Act, which was a congressional act to deal with some of the issues that hadn't been focused on in regulation issues, passed 88-2 in the Congress. And I think it's fair to say that both the current administration and the Democratic members of Congress share a lot of enthusiasm for nuclear, and that creates a baseline. It doesn't get you to an answer, but it creates that. So let's see that. So in my perspective, as I say, I also, in addition to that, to the RPE thing, I had chaired the Environmental League of Massachusetts, which some of you may have crossed paths with. It's a group that both has a C3, a charitable research side, and it has a political side. And we are the leading endorsement entity for state reps, state senators, state offices, and statewide offices. And it's a great organization. If you have an interest in finding something, website tells you lots of stuff about what's going on at the state. I wear both a legal and a business hat, and so I was, since 2000, I've been general counsel, business person for 6 or 7 venture-backed companies, so I've seen the world of startups. 2 of the last ones were 2 battery companies that were World Economic Forum pioneer technologies, winners, very smart, interesting folks. Ultimately, both companies did well, but not really well because the supply chain was in China and the mathematics don't work for lithium-ion batteries other than Tesla with a massive volume. And so it was you discover, and one of the lessons here below cost and trust is supply chain. If you don't have supply chains, and if you're concerned, as we are in nuclear, about national security issues, we've got to figure out how to have that happen. And you see there the Texas Nuclear Alliance. I remember it just is, as in the process of thinking about national issues, Texas is currently, along with Tennessee, sort of the leading states that have are spending money now. And one goes down and does due diligence of how other people do things. Because I think the lessons for this, back to the trust piece, and I was an aide to Barney Frank for 4 different semesters in college and high school. The lessons in public policy is, if you can show it has worked somewhere else and people understand that, with fair information, you are 80% of the way to getting something done. I mean, people, you have to have examples of how things have happened. And if you take nothing else away from this conversation, I would say an example, a thing that people sort of go, aha, is we have 99 small modular reactors existing in this country for the last 60 years. They're called nuclear aircraft carriers and submarines. They've been operated by the Defense Department safely. 24-year-old recent Annapolis graduates, Jimmy Carter was one way back when he got out of Annapolis, run 20-year-old kids who've been drafted or signed up. And the nuclear Navy has been safe, has not had accidents, and these are SMRs, that's what they are, and they've been regulated by the Navy, separate from the NRC. And so the model, the US does have a successful history with SMRs that doesn't immediately come to people's mind. Just because we think about innovation in this country, ARPA-E is a amazing place, and you see one of my favorite quotes from Bill Gates, and some of the ways that it makes a difference and why it works. And I would just say the critical thing is that people, when you're a high-risk entity, and our statute says breakthrough technologies, very unusual for Congress. Congress doesn't give ARPA-E a roadmap, doesn't say you have to spend 30% on solar and 10% on wind. It says do whatever you want. And I mean, what you think is where you can make a difference. And so it allows money to be, you pick people, if it's not working out, if the bright idea didn't happen, then we are able to move money to other grants at the same time within that program. I mean, obviously, if everything you pick is a success, you shouldn't be in this business. You should be in Las Vegas, okay? No, if it's high risk so there should be failures. It means you're trying stuff. And the lessons for the reasons I want to talk about it is to think about the lessons of what ARPA-E has done in both fusion and fission, just for people to think through. And as you see here on the fusion side, ARPA-E played a major role with 6 of the 8 companies that are now part of the federal program, got their first money from ARPA-E. And I think the key theory there was to sort of help figure out was a technology and the idea of trying many technologies. That was one of the big things. What's going on now, which is what's so interesting, as the lab work is showing that the idea works, that you're able to produce energy. But the question then is, can you get to a commercial project that will be financially doable? I mean, you can build a science project, but if it costs $20 billion to produce variable energy, then it won't be usable. The theory says we can do this, and that's sort of the next step. So what RB's been working on is stuffs about really basic stuff of trying to get materials that can work with such high temperatures, and stuff about planning out how do you have a facility that will actually be able to function reliably. One of the things about fission nuclear is it's 93% capability, 93% on an average basis, and the question is, how will fusion get to that same point? And that's one of the things. So there's a lot of nitty gritty stuff now that we've done the theory. That's sort of where that is. On the nuclear side, on the fission side, I think the things that's being most worked on is figuring out how to have fuel that can, taking the fuel that's been used before and figuring out how to use it again and to be able to use that and modify it. And again, there are great efforts at safety for weapons and avoiding stuff that creates plutonium and challenges from a nuclear weapons perspective. But there's a lot going on there. And there's a lot going on this basic question of how do you make something off-site and be able to manufacture it with cost in mind. And obviously, we've seen cost in mind has had some impact. The UAE built 4 nuclear reactors in the last decade, and the cost of the last one was the cost per kilowatt hour is 20 to 40% less than the first one. And so there are efforts going on to figure out how you drive costs down, because without that, this is a waste of people's time. And people have to believe that there's a cost component. Now, all energy is subsidized, as everybody tells us. Tax credits for oil and gas and wind and solar have their things. So everybody has some subsidies, but at the end of the day, you have to look at them and say, given the money that's being asked to spend, is this a reasonable thing? The last thing I just want to mention here, and we'll talk about it later, is that there are different ways to get nuclear power plants functional, not only the NRC, and that's the thing. The Department of Defense has the authority to license nuclear facilities and to test them and to operate them for their own use and for the use of federal government. So there's one of the things that I was working with Secretary Granholm in Washington around was the idea of putting nuclear SMRs on bases, having them serve the role for the base. That is often not a large use, but then to be able to take the additional power and perhaps with a virtual power agreement supply to the GSA or to the Veterans Administration or something in the States, so so the larger SMRs can be tested on these military bases. And so there's a lot of really interesting things, but at the end of the day, it's cost and trust, and I think regional approach. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Alex, you want to take a seat up front? Yeah. Dr. Mike Starrett, please come up.
Which is the way?
So it's just big white button is forward.
Okay, awesome. Great. Well, I'm Mike. Before I came to Radiant, which is where I work now, I used to be the chief commercial officer of Ocean Winds North America, which had in the area South Coast Wind and some others. And prior to that, I had worked on the Vineyard Wind project. I had done personally some thinking around summer of last year. You could sort of see the challenges that were coming down the industry. I'm sort of a new markets growth person, and I wanted to think about where can I be useful. And I spent some time in the nuclear industry, evaluating it, spending some time thinking about it, which I'll try to introduce here briefly, and ultimately took on more or less the same job at another nuclear company called Radiant. And so my remit there, just so you have a sense of the types of things that I can answer questions on, I have the team that's responsible for offtake, so customers, that's national security related, commercial customers, et cetera. I have our DC team, I have our Marcoms team, and I have our capital projects team. So I'm building our buildings, growing our buildings, having our customers, delivering the products to the customers. I just have a couple slides here, a few pictures. On this one, I just want to make sure that everyone's familiar with the stuff on the left. That's the AP1000s, if you like. Maybe just to give a taste of what those are like. It's a 10-year capital project from sort of first money into commercial operations date. That's the real difficulty with those. Obviously, it's anything can go wrong in the meantime, although everyone hopes that nothing does. And then they kick off around 1,000 megawatts at something like $150 a megawatt hour, something like that. SMRs are the new great thing. The physics always tell you to go big with nuclear. It's something that I did not appreciate until I worked with a bunch of nuclear engineers. The physics are profoundly better big. The challenge is that large-scale capital projects have all the things that are associated with large-scale capital projects, including cost overruns. And so people are hoping to find a middle ground with SMRs, and it's really TBD whether or not it's successful. I've made my own choice. And then on the very far side is microreactors. So this can be really any scale. Radiant's making 1 megawatt, probably go up to a couple of megawatts. But they're just smaller things. They're meant to serve. You could kind of think of them generally. I would think of them as a behind-the-meter resource. For Radiant's case, it's like a behind-the-meter solar plus battery equivalent, something like that. Just want to give a sense of like what can a really small reactor do. So here's a couple pictures. On the left is rendering. So like EV charging is a perfect example. Most of who we talk to have some site that they're wanting behind the meter because they're on like a 7% per year rate increase train with the local utility, and it's not great. And they are having a spikier load as they're adding EV charging to the facilities. And so they're trying to solve for their base load plus their peaks from the EV charging. So they're looking at pairing these small scale reactors with batteries, basically. Data centers, I think my general view about data centers is like they're very exciting. I get asked about it all the time. But of course, I've been working in energy forever, and data centers weren't important before. My own view is that gas and grid are going to provide basically all data center power. You can buy a brand new gas turbine and put it at a data center for around $130 a megawatt hour today, which is very hard. And you can get it today, which is a very hard paradigm to be competitive with. I'm not saying I like it. I'm just saying that's what it is. And then on the far right is just a picture of a footprint, just so you have some idea what are we talking about here. So there's like a little logo in the bottom corner, which is about the footprint of a microreactor to power that whole facility, just to give a sense of what are we talking about here. Okay, And then I just want to give a picture of this. And the purpose of this is really just to say, I think it's always useful to say, is this a today thing? Is it tomorrow thing? Is it a theoretical thing? So on the left, it just happens to be where I work. This is the reactor that we're building just now. On the right is where we're testing it. So you'll be able to keep the news of this. It'll turn on in the month of July, more or less, and run to full power. So the thing on the left is a full scale prototype, does megawatt, 3.5 megawatts thermal. The thing on the right is the Idaho National Lab Dome facility. Long and rich history of testing new nuclear power there. That thing that's outside is just the heat rejection. It's just how you get heat out of a hermetically sealed building. You have to do that. But the point is that it's a real thing. This is the point I'm trying to raise. And then the last thing, which I think is useful, is again, for me, I can't. 10 years is infinity away. It's too far away for me. So I try to think about what things can we build and do now, and so we're doing it now. So we are testing this, which I think is exciting. I think that's really great. We're also building a factory just now to produce these things, so they are genuinely factory produced. I'm responsible for this. I can say a little about how it's going and so on. But the top left is actually showing the actual site right now. It's unbelievable how Amazon has made it easy to build big empty warehouses. And so it'll end up looking like the right in about 6 months, more or less, from the left today. And then we're building a much larger factory that is going to follow just after it. And the reason why I'm raising all of this is because it's just a different paradigm that I want to make sure people have some awareness of. The paradigm is rather than going down an enormous capital project where you have to notice people in a 20-mile radius and have a 10-year planning period before you get energy from it, there is a way to have a shorter thing, but of course it has a lot of different challenges with it. So for example, like while the NRC, the nuclear regulator, can authorize that you can put these in 90% of the country, and that's fantastic. With a single authorization, it has the same footprint from a regulatory standpoint, same risk profile, which is inside the box, no matter where you put it, behind any Home Depot anywhere in the country. The challenge really becomes state and local. So if the regulator who declares that it's safe allows that it can be deployed anywhere, that's fantastic, but that does not mean that the state will allow that it can be deployed fast, quick, and easy in these places. And that's really an important element of trying to make these things successful. So that's what I'm here to chat about, and I look forward to it. I think this is the last slide, right? So
Yeah,
go to this one. Cool. Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Cindy. Cindy's the Senior Director for State Policy and Programs at the Clean Water Action. Please, you want to come up?
Hi, everyone. How are we doing? Great. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am, as stated, the Senior Director for State Policy and Program. But before that, I was the New England Director for Clean Water Action. And I spent a lot of time over the last few decades having lots of conversations with New Englanders across the region about our everyday life and about where we get our electricity and opinions. And wow, New England has a lot of varied opinions, don't we? I wanted to share that these conversations included a successful phase out of coal and oil-fired power plants over the last 20 years that really left a big footprint in host communities and surrounding communities' lives, together with allies at Conservation Law Foundation and many grassroots groups across the region. There has been a really deep recognition that we need to transition in a just and smart way and take advantage of this moment in time that is likely once in a generation to learn the lessons from insights that we can draw from our past energy programs and practices and think about a truly innovative next wave. So I'm very excited to be here as part of this discussion. I can tell you that we need to be clear-headed. I think we can all come together around some common values-based approaches. And ideally, we can find a good balance between pragmatism and vision. I think that's where we would like to be centered. A lot of our members understand that we need to keep the lights on and understand that we can do better than power sources that threaten our health. So just some of the values that I've seen anchored in these conversations that have taken place in churches and libraries and in front of legislative authorities and public hearings. New England really likes a fair deal and a level playing field. People understand that every form of energy, by and large, has an environmental impact and a health impact. And what's needed is a clear examination and a comparison across energy sources, and a look at the full cycle of operation. So that includes fuel mining, processing, generation issues, waste generation itself, and a decommissioning that ultimately leaves communities whole at the end of this cycle. I can tell you that one of the significant moments of my life was standing with some of our community leaders on the Braga Bridge in South Coast with a little bottle of bubbly, watching the implosion of cooling towers at the Brayton Point facility and really feeling that it was a significant moment and knowing that we were looking at the future and wanting to get the future right. So as a result of some of these conversations, they're epic when it comes to what our life can be and can look like in New England. I think New England, I've come to realize, loves and, dare I say, demands transparency, especially in the siting process for a proposed facility. Alex, I really liked how you brought up these twin guideposts of both trust and affordability. And trust is built or lost in the open discussion in rooms like these, which is so important. And it's also lost or won in a siting process that really looks at, hopefully, starting early, upfront conversation with the communities and not just a handful of municipal officials. Actual residents need, and I think increasingly are becoming, even more involved in siting processes than any of us could have imagined. I don't know if you all had watched over years the discussion about the East Boston substation siting. People are incredibly interested in large industrial facilities that come to their communities. And that's a factor for any large facility or economic endeavor. And being transparent in those discussions is one of the most important ways that you can build trust. Common sense also plays a role here. All of us can come together around a desire to see our energy reliability met. Absolutely, and met in a cost-effective way, the most cost-effective we can muster. And as New Englanders, we also really love a good deal, don't we? So affordable energy is a rallying cry for us right now. However, we don't accept unnecessary trade-offs. I want to flag here, just as an example of where trust can be lost, that if there's a safety cost associated with the operation of a facility, we don't like to see safety corners cut. And in the nuclear energy context, just one example of what I would call a cautionary tale is the effort the proposal to dispose of radioactive wastewater from facilities like the Pilgrim reactor in treasured spots like Cape Cod Bay in the name of cost cutting. That's, obviously that's just one example, but it's something that sticks in the mind, certainly, of all the residents in that region as something that they wouldn't want to see again. So just flagging that as one example. New Englanders, I would say, also have a real commitment, a true commitment to clean energy and are very concerned about persistent toxins. And honestly, many of us got involved with the efforts to clean up and transition away from coal plants because of the mercury emissions from coal-fired power plants. They're the single largest source of airborne mercury in the nation. So with love for the New England food chain and the aquatic environment and the fish in our region, first and foremost, together with many of the governments throughout New England, really work to get to zero mercury action plans, and that included a real focus on transitioning away from coal. So that same focus on moving away from persistent toxic waste is something we have to look at as part of a discussion about nuclear assets as well. Upfront disclosure of the creation of waste, and especially waste that is toxic and persistent, is really important in the trust building space. And it's something that we shouldn't shy away from as part of this debate. I guess my final point is that New Englanders care a lot about the safety of our own backyards. And we care about making sure that there are host community resources in an event of an accident or cleanup. One interesting example of this is a law that passed in Maine that I think Caitlin's team worked on successfully, relating to the advancement of chemical recycling facilities. The law, Maine LD 1660, sets up a requirement for funding to be set up in escrow accounts and reported on annually to the state, so that funding would responsibly exist to look at cleanups, and that these costs would not be pushed on to the local communities as a result. So I'm very interested in exploring with you all whether there's appetite for assigning a cost to the threat of host communities for accidents or cleanup of waste management issues. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. And these are some of the issues that we look forward to exploring with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy. You can grab any you want. Caitlin, you were queued up perfectly, right? So Caitlin is the Vice President for Climate and Energy at the Conservation Law Foundation, which is a great organization. Please.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Again, Conservation Law Foundation, if anyone doesn't know, we're an environmental advocacy organization serving all 6 New England states. And we have a lot of lawyers. I'm a lawyer. So some of our advocacy includes leveraging courts and judges to get people to follow the law. So one other thing that my team does in the climate and energy program is a lot of work in our energy markets and renewable energy and clean energy procurements, making sure that we're moving toward a fully clean energy mix in New England. I'm in this game to get us completely off of combustion fuels, both fossil fuels and any alternative combustion fuels. I think for that reason, others, we see real potential and hope in fusion and energy, and we're interested in advanced fission technologies with a lot of questions, which hopefully we're going to be exploring today. And to that point, so one of those questions that always comes up is it real, right? When we're having the conversation about new and advanced technology, especially when startups are in play, no offense, there's often talk and less action. And so it's really exciting to see the work that Radiant is doing and trying to prove out their new pathways and theories. So is it real? And then at what cost, right? And so once we start talking about at what cost, we want to look at the alternatives. Is this something that costs so much that we could overbuild solar and battery and wind to sort of cover the same amount of power needed? And then can that cost come down from first of a kind to nth of a kind? That's something we're particularly interested in. And I think it was mentioned earlier, talking about de-risking as part of this pathway and interest of the Commonwealth. We are particularly concerned about, de-risking usually means money. And so concerned about where public money is going as part of that conversation. And I think we at CLF are very excited about the workforce and innovation and research potential. That's what, Massachusetts is best at, is known for. So we definitely agree that that's kind of the foundation of our work here. And then maybe let the sort of infinite piggy bank of the federal government resources start investing in new technologies to test out, is it real, and at what cost? And then once we've seen that costs can come down, Massachusetts money could start to get involved. Because there's a real careful balance with all of the focus in my world right now on affordability of energy. That's a particular concern, that we are not bankrupting our energy system or asking customers to take untenable, be a counterparty to an untenably expensive contract. And so then the last note I wanted to make before we get into the discussion is we have an amazing market system in Massachusetts and New England. ISO New England is exceptional at managing the grid hour to hour, day to day, over the course of a year, and spotting resource adequacy concerns ahead of time. I think our market is not necessarily building or providing the capital needed to build new power facilities itself. We're getting, at this point, it really is a contract game, and so we're particularly interested and concerned about who is the counterpart of that contract and what are the protections for customers who are on the other end of that. But with that, I'll let us get toward the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Sandra. Eric, please come up. Eric's the Executive Director for External Affairs of ISO New England, and it was queued up perfectly by Caitlin.
Yeah, couldn't have planned that better.
Welcome
Thank you. Thank you for having us. It's a great program, and happy to have ISO New England in the conversation about electricity at the state level and at the regional level. I've heard some very interesting thoughts, and people wear different hats on this panel. Alex talked about funding stuff that will be part of the future. Mike talked about building stuff, and Cindy and Caitlin talked about advocacy around the types of technologies that they want to see exist in the future and maybe retire from part of the legacy fleet. And ISO New England's in a very different place as an independent system operator. We do three things. We operate the grid. That's the first thing we did starting in 1997. We plan the transmission to make sure that the needs of 15 million people in New England can be served by a reliable and robust transmission system. And then we were given the charge to create competitive wholesale electricity markets with a very different objective in the 1990s than what New England is thinking about today. And it's been focused on, let's make sure we have a reliable supply of power, and we always select the lowest price resources. And so if you think of that as the objective, it's been very successful. If you think about the environmental objective, some people will say, well, the markets are broken because they're not giving us what we want. And so I really appreciated the framing from the earlier speakers. And I would say, if the markets will do whatever you ask them to do. And so if we want to introduce an environmental element to this work, it certainly can be done. And I think that's one of the reasons the ISO has worked so closely with the states, with Massachusetts legislators, policymakers, regulators, to make sure that we find ways to line up our work at the regional level with the objectives at the state level. So I'll just highlight a few things on the nuclear side. And while we don't advocate for nuclear per se, we're always happy to have you and your students come in to learn about what we do. There's a lot of affinity for nuclear at ISO New England because many of the system operators who are running the grid for New England come out of the nuclear Navy and have the experience actually operating small modular reactors. So when you think about can we do this in New England? New England has lots of experience with nuclear power. We're not quite at the glory days when we had 9 different reactors across 8 different stations. We've actually retired 51% of the nuclear power in New England. But the remaining 2 assets in New Hampshire and Connecticut are really high output facilities. They produce no carbon emissions. They are providing base load power to the system all the time. They are not dependent on a pipeline to deliver fuel. They have on-site. So there are a lot of advantages to those technologies. And we were very excited this year to see the statement from the region's governors saying that we want to lean into looking at ways to advance nuclear technology. So we think ISO New England could be a great partner working with the states to do that. And very happy to be here to be part of this discussion. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Well, we have a great panel here. This is the rules of engagement. So I'm going to roll through a series of questions. I've got names that I will target for these questions. Probably 2 to 5 minutes, somewhere in there. I put time against every activity on our schedule today, and I think we're about 7 minutes behind, so we're doing okay. So I'm just going to get this rolling. And actually, the first question is to Eric, and it is related to the reliability and navigating the rapid changes in generation, electrification, and demand growth. So, Eric, what challenges do you see emerging over the next 10 to 20 years, and where do firm dispatchable resources fit into those discussions?
Well, they're going to need to fit in order for us to have a reliable system in 2030, 2040, and 2050. Is this mic working okay?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you.
Dispatchable is the sort of characteristic of most of the legacy fleet in New England. So we've had an experience where a grid operator can call upon a resource and expect that they're going to have the ability to run on demand. And so now we're making a big shift toward renewable resources, primarily wind and solar, which have all kinds of advantages for the system. Solar is actually the fastest growing resource in New England. It's everywhere. It's changing how we plan and operate the system, and it's providing a lot of benefits. Offshore wind is going to be injecting power right where the major demand centers are in New England. But both of those resources are very much weather dependent. And so the future really is nuclear, wind and solar as renewable resources. And then we're going to need something that's dispatchable. So for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the grid itself and probably a lot of highly efficient gas-fired generators operating on the system until something comes along. The UMass research team and maybe some of your projects get funded, and suddenly there are things flying to the ISOQ that don't exist today that can provide that rapid response capability. So we will need dispatchability more than ever as we're adding variable resources onto the system.
Thank you. And I think we all know that it's kind of an all of the above for the solution, right? So our next question, Alex. ARPA-E has a unique vantage point across emerging energy technologies. What are the most promising innovations you see today in advanced nuclear fusion, and where do the greatest uncertainties remain?
Thank you. I covered some of these in my opening statement, so I'm not going to try and repeat, but I would say that in the fission world, and in the SMR world, the potential for factory construction, I mean, back to the key points being, one of them being trust, one being cost. The cost piece, the nuclear industry has had only 4 facilities built in the United States in the last 40 years, and that workforce disappeared post 3 Mile Island and no new facilities effectively. And the returning to have something cost effective requires a workforce, which is part of our agenda here to talk about. And it requires a facility they call small modular reactors. The idea is they're able to be built off-site and brought into the location. And the ability to make something at a manufacturing basis is a challenge the United States has generally. If you take it, the idea, just the statistic that sticks in my mind is that in 2024, we built 4 global carriers, large ships that could carry fuel and cargo goods. And China built 740, and South Korea built 400 and something. I mean, and we built 7. We don't have the shipbuilding capabilities that we used to. We made them into condominiums on ports. And the ability for us to do something in a cost-effective way is critical. The example of the United Arab Emirates, where they built 4 nuclear reactors with South Korean leadership and Emirates folks involved, and over the decade, the cost went down dramatically of each of them and between the first and the last, depending, if you conserve very conservatively, it's a 20% reduction. Some people think a fair analysis is 40% reduction. But it all involves building lots of the same things. And that's the challenge we have. The CTOs and the technical in the utilities all wanted to change the reactor to justify their pay, literally. And so while we have literally only a small number of manufacturers of large facilities, we ended up with 57 different designs because somebody added an extra 5 feet of something. And I mean, it was to show that they were adding value. So the piece one of the things which we're working on is this issue of how do you come up with a design that is market tested and market accepted, and then be able to make it consistently, and without being able to, people trust that if it's made, and we do that in lots of things in this country, but we have not been doing that in nuclear. And that's one of the things we're trying to work on. And I think that's something which everybody recognizes. I would just say the other piece that's something that is really clearly, and we'll talk about these things, there are the small advanced nuclear reactors, why they have some support in the environmental community from people who hadn't supported the largest. There is more of a passive safety, both operating and security piece that is that is attractive. There's lots of stuff to be done to have people feel that actually would work and will work reliably, but that is one of the pieces that's out there. Just on the as I mentioned earlier, the idea of being able to reuse fuel, as is done in France, and is something that we've been working very hard at RPE on. And the fusion side, I would just say what's really exciting there is that you're past is it possible technically with some demonstration, but can you actually make it happen that it's not for a certain amount of money, you can do anything. And the question is, on a cost basis, can fusion be done? And we're working very hard on the nitty gritty of that. And that's what people are looking for. And that's what, and I think that's the goal, but it is very hard to do.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Mike, this question's for you. You have extensive experience in the deployment of large-scale projects. Oh, sorry. You guys, when you're 6'6", you get kind of far away from the mic. So this is for Mike. With your extensive experience in the development and deployment of large-scale projects, you could probably recognize that the success of these projects has a lot of things that are, need to come together: permitting, stakeholder engagement, financing, project execution, the technology itself. So based on your experience, what lessons do you think Massachusetts should carry forward if it wants to seriously evaluate advanced nuclear technologies?
Okay. Well, not to be inflammatory, but just to take the liberty to say what I really think. I actually don't really think that the challenge right now is the cost of fission. I think that if people could go out and buy an AP1000 for $145 a megawatt hour or whatever it is today and have it show up tomorrow at cost, they would buy an infinite number of them. The real challenge with the large projects that everyone is thinking about is there is nobody who has the creditworthiness and the willingness to take the indemnification of cost overruns. That's the real challenge with large scale nuclear. It's all that it is. Formerly the Loan Program Office, now called the EDF, is working incredibly hard. The CIO, Julie, is fantastic at trying to find a way to finance these. But the reality is that, you know, I think the example of the Koreans building a couple of reactors is helpful, but we also did that in Georgia. And the challenge is that with Vogtle 1 and Vogtle 2, everyone says, of course, with the second one, we learned our lesson. And what they mean is that we think that we learned a lesson about how to build them more cost effectively. And that's not what we learned. We learned that that was a pain. That was difficult, and most states are unwilling to put that kind of risk on the ratepayers again, and that's the real challenge that large-scale nuclear has. It is genuinely not the cost. I think the cost is fine, at least for some customers. It's just very difficult to actually finance and build something that has an open-ended cost that bankrupted a large-scale company in the past and doesn't have any proof points that show that it'll definitely happen again in future. So I think the government is going to announce some path to 5 reactors to 2 packs each, so 10 reactors total for AP1000s, but it'll be until 2035 until we learn whether or not any of that stuff materialized into anything, which is fine, but a long time from now. I think that we should always focus, of course, on doing things now. Now is a great time to do things. And I think that, you know, to that end, so I used to live in Massachusetts. I'm taking a sabbatical in California. And you know, in California, it's always interesting to me. There's 20 gigs of utility scale solar, which is awesome. But there's also 20 gigs of DG solar, customer-sited solar. And so they're even. Of course, the utility scale stuff makes more power because it's tracking in the desert and so on. But the point is that there's a lot of appetite for behind-the-meter stuff or smaller scale stuff, as long as it's economic. About 40% of that 20 gigs is more than a megawatt at each deployment. Those are the types of things that made me think more about small-scale nuclear. So my own view is, in order to seriously evaluate nuclear or genuinely deploy it, you have to have, first of all, a proven use case. No customer is ever going to let these things come on their customer site or within their community if they haven't been proven out. I think that's super important. Government's playing a fantastic role in that. So we're deploying, in our case, the first reactor at Buckley Space Force Base at the beginning of 28. I was just there. They're super enthusiastic about it. The government. I think people will look back at nuclear and think that actually the government was unbelievably helpful here in a way that they were not at all in my past life in offshore wind. I would just say candidly. So you have a proven one. That's very helpful, of course. You need to have the operational experience, and then it has to be economic. That I couldn't agree more with Kaylin. I think it has to actually genuinely pencil against solar plus batteries and wind plus batteries. It'd be foolish to go down that road. And you can sing a long tale about nth of kind cost, but like your first one should be pretty darn close to where you want the last one to be. And then the most important thing, more important than anything else, is like, can a developer actually get from, hey, I want to do this to, hey, I'm allowed to do this? And that's the part where I think the state needs to do a lot of work to make this path clear. I just want to go back to something I said in the opening, because I just want to say how stark the challenge is. When you get a new reactor authorized by the NRC, which is a safety regulator. So I'm an expert in our technology, so I'll just talk about it, but I'm sure others are similar. I just don't know. You know, our emergency planning zone is the box. So, you know, it's like literally the worst case possible scenario is still contained within the box. When we get it authorized by the NRC, it'll be authorized for more than 90% of the US. So you could deploy it in the back of any place with the same risk profile from the NRC's perspective. You just have to send them your site data. And so from the perspective of the regulator, they are actually indifferent if it's at place A, place B, or place C, as long as it fits within that envelope and it's proven to be safe. And yet it could take us 18 months and millions of dollars to actually get that tiny amount of power put behind that building. That's unacceptable. That's a place you would never be able to get to and actually deploy these things. And look, I haven't been following the gas industry in New England recently. I've taken a little break. But like, you could knock me over a feather if they're not talking about building a new gas plant or a new gas pipeline. And that's the alternative to actually getting this stuff done. So those are my views. I think everything here is solvable, and we do not need to wait for innovation or future cost curves or whatever it is. We just need to make it possible to deploy these things and then let it happen.
Thank you, Mike. Kaylin, this question's for you. Environmental organizations have played an important role in shaping energy policy across New England. Very important. What questions do you believe must be answered before advanced nuclear technologies can be seriously considered as part of the region's clean energy future?
Thank you for the question. I want to pick up off of where Mike was, because I think we need to talk more about community voice and public power as part of the penciling exercise. Time is money. And if a community can stop a facility, that needs to be part of your balance sheet, right? It's not about how much it costs to buy a Westinghouse reactor. It's about how much it costs and how much time and effort it costs to put it in the ground and actually hook it up. And so certainly one of the questions that needs to be solved is, how do you actually assess the safety of any particular technology and then turn that into public policy to have, safety understood and agreed upon by policymakers, and then turn that around into, do the people who have to live next to it believe that as well? How do you get them on board? I think something that really encouraged a lot of folks about the memorandum of understanding from all the governors on nuclear was the mention of consent-based siting, something that Governor Hochul's looking at in New York as well. Cindy and I have both been in the fights over many different types of technology. And again, if a community can stop or delay, prolong a project with appeals, that's money. And community leverage is hard to give up. I think Massachusetts did about as good a job as anyone could in the siting reform conversation in the last years. I was on the siting commission for the governor, and we had a lot of really intense conversations about those trade-offs. But ultimately, our siting regime for clean power cedes some leverage to the public interest of getting clean resources built faster. And so, every time you need to try to do that and to take some leverage out of the equation, it's going to be a big political fight. And so you have to be really sure and really able to communicate the safety and effectiveness of the technology.
Awesome. Thank you. Cindy, this is a beautiful follow-up to Caitlin's. So public trust is often dependent as much on process as is on technology. From your experience working with communities, what concerns are most important for policymakers and developers to understand?
That's a great question. I think it starts with honest, very transparent conversations and building relationships with the local municipal leaders, with the fabric of the community itself, the opinion leaders in the community. Often, many of the issues that we've been discussing here today will be of utmost importance. So obviously, cost to communities, potential benefits to communities. What is the profile of the facility? Is the facility going to be a good neighbor in the best definition, the most concrete definition? Are there very transparent conversations about the potential risks of accidents or of waste generated or of air emissions? I think, again, Massachusetts is in a great position when it comes to looking at the equity of siting facilities and looking at the profile of communities that are often targeted. And very grateful that Massachusetts has a cumulative impacts policy that looks explicitly at air pollution issues in a cumulative way when it comes to facilities. I think the hope is that that policy will expand over time to look at water impacts, to look at land impacts, to look at issues in addition to air pollution. So being real about protections needed for low income and BIPOC, multiracial, cultural communities. That's a big part of this discussion. And it has been a very active discussion in Massachusetts and in other spots in the region. So I think those equity issues are significant, and just a transparent look, comparing to all options about what is the true impact on the community and surrounding region. Are there benefits for the community? Are there safety hazards? How long will this facility be in operation? Is there a plan to safely decommission the facility at the end of its use cycle? And yeah, I think communities really do care about the affordability question. So all of those questions and curiosity, I think, comes out in a siting process and early advanced conversations with folks. I can't emphasize enough. That is a really important piece of any siting process for a large facility.
Okay, I'm actually going to follow up on that with Caitlin. So, Cindy, you make a great point about the things that are really important for us to get right and to consider. I guess this question is more around the form and function, the format of what public engagement and transparency really looks like. Like, how do we assure the public and the people who have risk in these projects that we are getting it right from an evaluation perspective, and it's in a transparent way? Like, do we go to everyone's house and knock on the door? Do we have a format in every neighborhood? Like, functionally, what does this look like?
Yeah, I can start on this. I mean, what I immediately think of, some friends of mine and Cindy's in Chelsea worked with an energy storage developer to put together essentially a virtual power plant project with very little friction, because the developers went to not only the municipality, but also community groups, and immediately, started earning trust in a way that that community and what they had observed of the process in East Boston with the substation there, there were immediately contrasts to draw. The developer wasn't trying to sneak anything by them. They were upfront right away about their intentions and what the benefits would be to the community. And I think that's a non-negotiable starting place to, you're never going to be able to go to door, win over every individual. But if you're not, as I think people are very sensitive to seeming like someone's just trying to check a box, you're trying to make it seem like you have community support, but you're only talking to municipal leaders who may not have that kind of trust with their own full community. And as Cindy said, focusing on engaging with community members as sophisticated people who know best what happens in their community and offering a clear benefits package. And that's where I start. And the siting reform process that we got in place, that's taking effect in a week and a half, 2 weeks, is really hopefully built to incentivize developers to go that path rather than trying to brute force their way or just nod toward public process.
And do you think that the Massachusetts state legislature should have, agnostic of a particular project, should have this kind of engagement so that we can get to a rational regulatory framework in anticipation of these types of projects coming forward? Or do you think the project leads and the process follows? Personally, I don't, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have certainly, hopefully, the template in place for renewables and grid resources, storage right now. Nuclear is not included in that pathway at the moment, but if the conversation around safety and efficacy can be had at that level, then I think you need to follow a similar process. And I think that would lead from the legislature. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to change the formatting of the questions. These are more cross-panel questions. So anybody who wants to jump in, please. So I tagged some of these in the order that I thought may be most interesting. So here's the first one to the panel. Many states are creating task force, advisory bodies, funding programs, and demonstration initiatives around advanced nuclear. What can Massachusetts learn from these efforts, and what should be avoided? Anybody?
Say that thinking regionally is really important. If you think about when the nuclear plants were built in New England, there were no markets. They weren't bidding these resources into a market. The states and utilities got together and said, this is the resource that we want. They called them pool planned units, I think. And then they built a transmission system around those units. So they all fit into a system. And, you know, Massachusetts is half of New England in terms of the demand for electricity. So it's a very big part of the system. But when 6 governors say this is really important to us and we want to find solutions, I think that's really important too. And we'll engage with them on this type of supply and whatever other new supply options there are. We tried the offshore wind, provided a lot of support for that and technical support. We got some, not as much as the states wanted, but I think we're going to have to work together to make any of these things work.
Anybody else?
I'll just toss in that I think Massachusetts should work smarter, not harder, in the context of all of these other states. I have no doubt that UMass Lowell and the folks working with Melissa Lavinson, the Office of Energy Transformation, are keeping a keen eye on what New York and other states are putting out. And so as a lawyer, you want to see what is out there and then you want to adapt it to your situation. And so as long as Massachusetts keeps focusing on our core value adds in innovation, research, workforce development, and then try to learn from, if another state wants to put a lot of money into a particular technology, let's learn from that, but not necessarily follow them with our pocketbook.
I agree. Thank you.
One more, just
Cindy.
quick comment. Honestly, all of this discussion of innovation is welcome. I think thinking clearly about the waste profile of these facilities is another place where innovation and balancing out cost from the perspective of local leaders from environmental justice communities, that strikes me as a pressure point at the community level, at the local level. Being honest, being transparent, really looking to innovate further than we have, I think would be a very helpful point of focus.
Alex, please.
I would just add that the other part of process is predictability, and that people, and that the goal be to not, you get through and then you change it. And so the people feel there was a problem and then it got fixed by changing the process. So I think process needs to have various different places for public input, and I think the roadmap is exactly an example of that, the way you guys have done that in terms of both small groups and specific stakeholders and public sessions, and people can watch this from wherever they are and that kind of, and so I think, I think one of the things you guys have talked about in your recommendations has been the creation of an information hub and a way for people to get good information, free and timely and be able to then react to it, which is partially what this is about. But I think the reality is that there will be a continuing need for public education, for advocacy where folks who have different views are present. And I think that is, we live in a country where we think if people who have different perspectives appear and hear each other and respond, that we get to a better place. And that decision makers and public at large feel better when what they're hearing isn't a simple uniform view, but reflects that there are challenges that need to be addressed. And I think this process is, I think, off to a great start on that. But I think it is important, but the regional piece is also something we have to think about, because at the end of the day, I think there will be, along the lines of, there will be stuff that happens throughout the region, and people need to feel that they were listened to. I think the governors are trying to model that, and that's a good thing. But a process that is predictable. And the other piece one just has to say is that nuclear stuff has an extraordinarily federal focus in the laws, and Congress has given the NRC exclusive jurisdiction in many areas. So things that the NRC is working on are stuff that is not stuff that the state can directly rebut, but there are impacts of those which the state can take a view needs to be resolved before, and the state effectively has vetoes through the ability around planning and signing off on everything from permits to literally curb cuts. And there are ways that states can slow something down dramatically. But we have to acknowledge that nuclear has a very strong federal piece, and it's the impacts that are something that people will be looking at, and we need to. And I think the discussion we've had here about the impact piece is very wide. Just something which I saw is an example. If you're going to put a facility in a place, one of the ways you have impacts is perhaps there are local trained folks from impacting communities who play a role both in perhaps helping install them or in play. I mean, their impacts can be broadly seen, so the communities feel at the end of the day. I mean, everything we do, we pay taxes. That costs us money, but we get something for it. There's pros and cons. Nothing is perfect, but people need to feel that they had a role in impacting that.
Thank you, Alex.
Maybe you want to get a question from the audience?
Please. Just flip it up when you get there.
I just wanted to get some steps in.
You did very well. I want to thank you all for a very informative presentation. As an audience member, it was extremely helpful to hear all points of view. Caitlin, CLF, Clean Water, a member of the industry, ISO, and ARPA. It just worked. So thank you. My question, as I was listening, had to do with a couple of the themes that were raised, and that forms a question. You talked about benefits, acceptance, risk, hazardous waste, all I think which are unique to nuclear power. And if I'm a community or an industry person, and I'm trying to think about this, compare and contrast to other options because of the costs and some of the unique challenges, what is it going to take to resolve those unique elements of nuclear power, and finally land one way or another, I think, on Caitlin's question, which is this going to work? And when are we going to know that? And because I think we have to really understand that as part of any understanding of how this is going to fit into what we all have as a goal to do something about the impacts of climate change and to meet the Commonwealth's goals. So again, thank you for raising all those themes and questions and concerns. I'd like to have someone put it together for me and just tell me how that's all going to work.
You got the mic. You want to answer that question?
In the audience. I have some questions for y'all.
Just, I'll take a brief crack at it. Well, my experience with community engagement, and I couldn't agree more that it's extremely important, especially if you're at a really large scale and you're going to have like enormous cooling towers and so on. I mean, obviously, and there's going to be hundreds of people and thousands of trucks and all that stuff, which I totally understand. There is an element though where you have to be a bit practical. I think generally when you engage with community, the people who are everybody comes, the people who are curious and approaching it in good faith will come. Many of the people who are supportive of it will eventually depart because they're satisfied, and then what you end up with is never-ending trail of negativity about the projects that you're building on, and you can have that engagement till the end of time. And so there has to be some element of whether or not at a certain point there's a decision to move out. And I think that decision has to come in part from whether or not we've taken a decision at the beginning. I genuinely think that there's an element. I don't think the state should be, providing subsidies, be providing indemnifications. I think the financial protections from the people in the state need to be absolute. But the state should make a fair analysis of whether or not this is a thing that they want. And if it's a thing that they want, they need to be more forward lean on having it happen. When I talk about my own experience in project development and I explain to people, I worked in New England, the upper mid-Atlantic, and California, like the reaction of most people were like, oh, those are some tough places to build projects. It doesn't have to be that way. That's a negative actually in some ways, because you always have to think about what is the BATNA to what you're doing. So what is the best alternative to whatever it is that you're getting? And if you're in a spin cycle till the end of time about projects that are like carbon free, have proven to be unbelievably safe, have an incredible track record that far exceeds anything that's ever been done, but you're swirling about whether or not you're going to build something new, like in the interim, you will just burn and build more gas infrastructure. And if that's what you're satisfied with, fantastic, but that is going to be the outcome of it. So my own view is that there has to be a direction taken at the state level about whether or not this is a thing that they want to have happen. And if it is something they want to have happen, there has to be some path to actually making it so.
To add one thing, I do think that the idea of site visits to other projects that are similar to what's being proposed, I have found is if you're thinking about that, is there is very little that's being, even I mean, the stuff you're doing, people will come to your facility, assuming they can get inside the Air Force Base. But the concept of seeing that something has been done that is being proposed, and if there are several examples over time, that builds, then the question is, are the people who are proposing it themselves effective and competent and have a record of meeting the promises of what they've said they're going to do? But people seeing that something has happened before, very few people want to be a laboratory for something that's never been done before. That is a very hard argument to make to people, and appropriately, it's a hard argument. So that if you can say, but of course, things that are new, you can argue this is similar in these aspects, and here's why it's not a completely new idea. I mean, just take my point of, we have 99 SMRs that have operated for 60 years in the military, okay? And they've had a history and they're up. And so something that's been done before is very important, and people being able to see it. But then they may also decide the developer is not trustworthy. That's another problem.
I'll pop in and say the role of trusted, objective, third-party analysts who have no financial stake in a project, very important in the siting of facilities. Often trusted local voices, like in the example that Caitlin raised about Chelsea, Chelsea Green Roots was a local voice that has impeccable credibility with the local community and with local decision makers. So if you can build a case that can be supported by some of these unbiased third-party observers, that is a critical piece. And being very upfront about all of the issues. I think transparency and honesty is a big part of building trust and getting facilities to move forward. If we can't do that, I think Caitlin is right, that there are a lot of levers that can be pulled. I get frustrated around what I see as funded opposition to technologies like offshore wind. And, we live in an environment of crankiness, and I guess is one of the words I would use, and vocal concerns about change in a very changeable world. And I would say also that it's a tough moment from a regulatory perspective because people have seen the staff cuts from the NRC. And I think as a result of that, there are deep concerns about how the industry is regulated at a national level. And we really do rely a lot on our state-based and local decision makers to help pick up the slack on this and a number of other issues. Of course, there are everybody has a different lane to play in, and that's particularly complex in the nuclear setting. But honestly, it is hard to imagine getting a nuclear facility to move forward without some objective third-party, trusted community voices saying that this is a good pathway for a community to consider. And I think that's reality.
I'm going to take a stab at cross-panel conversation. Pivoting off this point, I think we're definitely hearing about there's like a spectrum of cost and feasibility, and the size of the facility really plays into that. Mike's presentation and what the work his team is doing, I think, exemplifies that. They've got steel in the ground and facilities ready to be built where Darlington in Ontario, Oakville in Georgia shows us if you're looking at sort of what we consider big utility scale baseload nuclear, that's a multi-decade, if ever, process here. And so I'd kind of pitch it to Eric. I'm curious about the ISO's perspective on the size of resources, because if we are talking about essentially distributed nuclear, that's a very different conversation than sort of the dispatchable baseload profile.
The development of generation, we use a technical term, we say it's lumpy. And so when you think about when you're going to need new supply, it's when a large plant retires. So when the Braden Point plant left and the cooling towers collapsed, you lost a lot of supply capability. We had excess at the time, so we were okay. But now we're in a period where you're seeing lots of load growth. So I think you're going to need more of probably a lot of stuff. I'm not saying we're expecting large scale 1,000-megawatt nuclear plants to get developed in New England, but a bunch of smaller advanced nuclear reactors will probably be really helpful. Our studies show that demand on the grid is going to double by 2050 in order to meet the state's goals for electrification. So we're going to need to find a lot of resources to kind of fill these buckets over the next decades. And I wouldn't say it should be like one. The beauty of the way the states and the federal government have a role here is the states under the Federal Power Act control sort of the resource side. The ISO administers markets that are in interstate commerce. That's why we're regulated by FERC. But the states can say, this is what we want to move forward, and this is what we want to go away on the system. So I think they're kind of in the driver's seat for what's going to come forward.
Anyone else? Great answers. So let's take a step back away from thinking about the immediate technology. And I've heard a little bit about this, but I'd like to get some consolidated into a vision. So what conditions help innovation move successfully from laboratory to commercial development? And I'm just going to add that here at UMass Chan, we do clinical trials. We try to go from bench to bed with therapies that we have patients that need today. And when I got into this business many decades ago, the drug development pathway was nothing short of 20 years. So you would meet your patients, and largely the patient would aspirationally say, I'd like to give some money so that someone down the road could be cured. Now, we have the same scenario here where we have a climactic condition that's being produced, and you can debate how it comes or not. I don't care. But we also have the impact of those changes on the world, our residents, our people. And so if we're going to solve this, what conditions do we need to create? Is it public-private review boards? Is it a permitting strategy that is established upfront that we can have engagement with and have confidence that we can actually get a project from being proposed to being online? What does that an ecosystem look like so that we don't get stuck in this 20-year bench to bed problem that we have? Today, we're trying to get that from 3 years from bench to first inpatient. But I think in this discussion around climate, time is not our friend here. And so I would like to hear from the panel, what are those critical pillars of creating an ecosystem where a meritorious project can actually be successful? Anybody want to take that? Please.
There are 2 points. One, I would say the world of drugs is a very different world than what we now, because the current administration doesn't like the word clean energy. So it's now got the phrase hard, tough tech or something. There's a different phrase, but the world of life sciences and the drug piece is a very predictable world, in that you meet phase 1, you meet phase 2. If you get that, you get $1 billion. If you disappear before that, you're done. And it's a real on and off system. The world of, and so that takes a lot of money, but it also is truly yes or no in terms of whether you go forward. The world of tough tech and all the stuff that we're talking about, the technology is, or improvements in it, or innovation, as you spoke to, is one that has no easy answers. At the end of the day, the question is, will people buy it? Does it meet a need? And is there something the market will support? And so it's a different set. One of the things we haven't mentioned here, but I just think in the future of this whole, how you finance something, is the first of a kind, and how do you get that done? And one of the ideas that there's a lot of support for is to say the market picks, let's just say 2 or 3 different use cases, and then picks a product, whether that you're Radiant or picks some product, and then you effectively say the people who want to buy it, nobody wants to pay the cost of the first one and the implementation side. But if you can find buyers who say, I'll pay 1/10 of the cost of the first 10, okay, and so effectively the cost that relates to the putting it in, not perhaps building something extra, but so that therefore effectively the first person, the 2x cost for the first one, the 1.5 for the second, and the 0.7 for the 8th and 9th, everybody agrees to pay one time. It requires purchasers who have good balance sheets. That's one of the things that the data center world offers, because the folks there have balance sheets. It's one of the data center piece, we haven't mentioned that here otherwise, and it is one of the use cases for nuclear down the road, but not in the short term. But the issue of first of a kind and putting together order books, that's how somebody who wants to get something done can be, and people have confidence that if I buy it, I'm not paying a crazy number. I think that's one of the ideas we'll hear about over the next few years.
So Alex, you're referring to the bankability of it. What about the regulatory or the public engagement?
Well, I think I think the idea of the models we've talked about here is what this model, why we're here today.
Of course.
I think there is experience in doing that, but I think your question of how we actually move, the other word that's used in the innovation world is how do you scale up?
Yes.
How do you go from having one, a demonstration, a pilot, and how do you actually get it that on an economic basis, people will put their money in? And one of the things that we do is we have RPE as a program where effectively once you've been proven technology working, we have a scale-up program, but requires that you bring half of the money for the demonstration from private so that it's not a boondoggle, that the venture capital firms have to put up real money and the federal government matches that, okay? It's to get the project so that you can got something that is in the market. But those kind of questions, how do you get first of a kind built, is a critical question, without which you don't have anything happening.
Okay. And I think we have a question in the audience.
Yeah, we have a few questions in the audience and also some online. So I think maybe we want to try to like get the answers like fast, because I think I'm already seeing some more hands up. So
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. The question is about how do you deal with actors who use the environment as an excuse to stop a project, like NIMBYism? Like they just manufacture some, like this is going to disrupt the ecosystem, not because it's going to do that, just because they don't want that particular project in their communities. So like, how do you like navigate such a situation? Thank you.
Anybody want to take that?
Venture into that one. We are often asked to engage on behalf of truly clean technology to provide a voice that can dispel false information. I think that is one of the roles that all environmental groups are asked to play, and that we very carefully and take very seriously those obligations to focus on truth, to be a broker, an honest broker of what impacts are. And I don't think any of us, certainly no one here at this table, would want false claims to stop promising technology from moving forward. So honestly, there is a whole set of players in this kind of debate, and those are some of the safeguards that we have to make sure that local opposition is fact-based or credible or informed. So that's what I would say. I don't know if the rest of you have additional perspective.
In the interest of being really quick, I'll just toss in that I think something we did in the siting reform process was to look at cumulative impacts, which Cindy mentioned before, meaning for me, cumulative impacts is a filter for really saying this is a community that can't bear this extra impact, pollution, noise, whatever it is. And that is a way for the state to kind of navigate around the loudest, not in my backyard because I like my backyard pretty concerns, and really trying to focus on the facts of what the impacts will be on the people who live there and the impacts that they're already bearing.
Thank you. We have some questions in the audience.
Thank you. And I would just like to request that people identify themselves when they're asking questions. I'm Clint Richmond. I'm the Conservation Chair for the Massachusetts Sierra Club. We have members in every town and city in the Commonwealth. I just want to raise, I guess I want to make a comment, which you're welcome to respond to, but I don't like the term advanced nuclear. I think it's a biased term. It's like calling it super cool. And I think we should use something like current or latest. Clean is also biased in this case, I think, because it's not just about carbon. I want all my climate solutions to be clean. It's about total emissions, and tritium and waste heat can be operating emissions. Clean should be renewable, not mine fuel. As has been mentioned, it's not just operating costs per kilowatt. I just think the determining cost in this case is impossible when we have so many externalized costs and incomplete information regarding full life cycle costs, especially disposal of waste. There's the cost of accidents that are hopefully low probability, but are potentially catastrophic. I don't know how to figure those in. And if you're in one of those communities like Fukushima, it's not something you say, oh, well, on average, it balances out. I want to underline what Cindy said about a level playing field. Cost is a tricky thing for all forms of energy when we have past and ongoing subsidies, which have been substantial for nuclear, and it has been in other forms of energy as well. And finally, I think there's something we also have to recognize about the tyranny of the majority here. It's not about NIMBYism. It's about the unequal power between communities and large industries, and even the federal government in some cases is not always our friend. And I want to point out that some people have lower tolerance of risk, no matter how truthful or accurate the information is, they may never be comfortable with it. And finally, some people may have health concerns, which could impact them disproportionately when it comes to nuclear. Maybe you've had cancer and you've already been treated with radiation for your treatment. So we have a lot of factors here to discuss. And finally, I just want to say, we keep talking about the naval SMRs. SMRs by themselves are not inherently safe. I think we could look at Russian SMRs in submarines and find a different kind of experience. Thank you.
Other questions in the audience? We have some on, oh, I see 1, 2 hands. And I know we have a question online too.
While I'm walking over to that next question, it's great to get these kind of comments in, but certainly we want to take advantage of the audience that's there. I mean, the panel that's there to get questions answered. So one question that was asked is about, clarification on the characterization of SMRs for the naval reactors. And, is it important to distinguish them not just in scale and scope, but also in terms of fuel and what the SMRs that are being designed for commercial applications? And that was an online question.
I would just say I don't think I think the question, SMRs are smaller than the SMRs that are being proposed now. Some of them, although the aircraft carriers are fairly large use cases. I think the comparison to Russian SMRs, at least in the analysis I've seen about what's going on externally, the Russians historically had a horrendously poor safety record and may well have continued that, but I don't think the things that are being proposed now are seen as modeled in any way on the Russian experience. But as one who has, people talk about the Chinese have SMRs that they built, and I think those are comparisons, and I don't believe they've had. So I think a comparison to the Chinese who are actually building stuff and publicizing it and people are visiting them. I don't know what the Russian example is. But I think everything has costs and benefits. I mean, the comment about people have a low risk profile. I mean, the question is in tyranny of the majority. If I live in a town and I have a low risk profile, is your answer you should be able to do nothing to change the community? I mean, that's the question, and whether there's been cumulative impacts already. I mean, I don't believe one person in a community should be able to veto any change in that community and take the view, I don't want any changes. I know the Sierra Club on a national basis has listed nuclear energy in a list, which they didn't publicize, but they put on their website, of nuclear as a green, clean energy. It was one of 8 items, and that was a big internal fight within the Sierra Club, but that was done in the last 5 years. So there are people, and there was a fight within your organization about that. But ultimately, you're going to put that on that list. So nothing is easy. Nothing is totally easy here. There are choices to be made.
Thank you, Alex. Sukesh?
Just to build upon what Alex just said, I'm a former Navy officer, and comparing us versus the Soviet is apples and oranges. All right. So now to my question. David, you had mentioned that time is not our friend. Alex, you had talked about cost and trust, and I'm going to kind of go to the cost side because I think that's a major driver. And then Eric, you had mentioned about lowest cost selected first. That's just how the ISO brings it up and down assets. So if you look at it kind of like a table, large, medium, and small, and then you've got the question is, when is it feasible to be actually running once someone says, let's do it? And then what's the cost per megawatt hour, and what can it produce as a cost per megawatt? I would just be curious as to get the panel's opinion simply because those are going to majorly drive policymakers, decision makers, et cetera.
Maybe I'll take a first crack. So let's see. There's a lot of ways to think about costs. So I'll just list a couple numbers I think are useful. So desert solar, if you just want to construct it, is about 1 point. Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay. Like I said, I think you could go and sign up for a AP 1000 for sub $150 a megawatt hour. It's just going to take 10 years and it might cost twice as much. I mean, I'm not saying it will. I hope it doesn't. I'm just saying that's the risk profile. 150, 150 cost of energy, $150 a megawatt hour with an 80-year life. That's more or less what they are, as I understand it. The group in the middle is really TBD, and the hope is that it's fantastic, and the proof is TBD. I think at the smallest scale, the most important thing is to recognize that when you're a behind the meter resource, you are offsetting both of the delivery charge and the energy charge. And so your cost, and in anyone's bill, it's about half and half, right? So half your bill is the electrons, half of it is the wires. So if you're paying on average, in New England, 20 cents, something like that for a commercial customer, in California, maybe 25 cents, something like that. That's where those smaller scale reactors have to be competitive with to be economic for their customers is competitive with the all-in cost of grid power, which in the upper quartile states, so the top 25% is more than 20 cents a kilowatt hour, just to give you a sense. No, that's inclusive of the construction cost. Yeah, it's 15 cents a kilowatt hour. Yep. I don't own or build those. That's just my best understanding. I think I'm reasonably informed.
Of the nuclear plants that we operated, 6 shut down and 2 are remaining. The ones that are remaining are the larger assets. They have a bigger economy of scale to spread those costs over. So the smaller stuff went away first, and the larger stuff has survived and is going for relicensing. So I think that's maybe an indication of the challenge of doing small stuff versus bigger stuff. But I don't think we're going to do the bigger stuff right now. So we're going to have to figure out how to make the smaller stuff work.
I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you by saying I think the numbers, everything is dependent upon the conditions and what's going on. I think one of the things about nuclear is the idea of there may be facilities that are built where existing nuclear facilities are, so that both there is some where the community impact is something that the folks who've lived with it also that can chime in on whether they're happy with that or not. And in some places they are, in some places they aren't. And the ability of having transmission already there to that site and having what the community is looking for from the operator. I think you will see a lot of, whether it's the restarting of some facilities such as Palisades in Michigan, or you see people, and they're talking about putting 3 or 4 SMRs on the same site of the nuclear. I think you're going to see, but the ability to come up with numbers that are valid, apples to apples, are very difficult. The reality is nuclear has not figured out how to drive its costs down as a general principle. That is reality, but it is also, there are signs that it may be heading in that right direction. But everything has subsidies. I mean, this question of what you do about indemnifications and Price-Anderson and the subsidies for the oil and gas industry are immense. And every industry has baked subsidies into it. So the question of what people are, it is fair to be concerned about nuclear and cost, and without the industry persuading people that they are making major improvements, it won't go forward.
Okay. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to go on to our lightning round. So this is a question to basically all of our panelists. So first question. In one sentence, what is the biggest opportunity for Massachusetts related to advanced nuclear and fusion over the next decade? You have 1 minute to answer.
I'll start and take the easy one, which is fusion R&D. UMass Lowell, one sentence.
Okay. Alex?
I would say a bipartisan regional approach is, I think, for if we can look back 10 years from now and say we had an approach that was New England wide, I think the benefits of having an impact is dramatically increased over doing something simply as a state by itself.
Eric?
I would say look at what the markets, and by that I mean the ISO wholesale markets value, which is resources that provide capacity and energy on demand, and think about resources that fit that bill.
Thank you. Cindy?
I would say that the biggest opportunity before us is to dive deeper into the waste conundrum and to truly make some progress on that front.
Mike?
Massachusetts is unbelievably ambitious. It's probably one of the best states in the country. And I think that, energy is a huge challenge here. And the important part of Massachusetts is the state has shown conviction and inability to work through them.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Lightning round question 2. What are the biggest gaps in information, analysis, or public understanding that need to be addressed for informed decision-making process around advanced nuclear and fusion? You have 1 minute.
We talk a lot about safety, and I think it's easy to take for granted. I think the most important, the single biggest thing is I think people really should contemplate the cost of inaction and what happens when you don't take a decision. I think this is the most important missing piece of information.
I would say I actually love the focus on the cost of inaction, and I would love to see the parameters widened to look at other technologies that are maybe more affordable, potentially, and have less of a threat of long-term unforeseen consequences.
I would say enhance energy literacy so people know what we're actually talking about.
I would say that cost is once you look the costs, all-in costs, which is, folks, what are the decommission costs? What are the waste costs? But also there may be a higher start cost at the beginning, but the cost is lower over the course of time. But having a comprehensive view of cost, and not just what do you pay in the first year or first 5 years, what do you pay over time, and how do you ensure that at the end there's resources to deal with impacts?
In addition to all of the above, I think one thing I'm hoping the roadmap question answers for me is how do we make Massachusetts' strategy on energy, advanced energy, clean energy, no regrets? And how do we have a clear-eyed view of when there's an off-ramp, when we're not going to pursue that particular technology more, it's not panning out, we're going to have to put our resources into the next one.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I want to thank our panel, which I thought was great. Can you give me a hand? So I hope this answered questions. I'm sure there's a lot of questions that we need to answer, but we really appreciate everyone coming and the engagement and the questions from the audience. And I think that we should thank Gwen for assembling this whole thing. And Sukesh for leading this effort. So thank you all.
Well, thank you all again. I think we have about 10 minutes if people want to stick around. I think the panelists, if they don't have to fly out. I know there were a few other hands up. I know Chris wanted to ask a question. Maybe we can stick around. I just want to make sure that we allowed for some time for people to stretch their legs and out, but feel free to engage. I think that's the one new element that we're bringing into this, is to be in person so you can have conversations. And I hope to see you on the July 15th. Have a good 4th of July holidays coming up soon, and looking forward to more engagement through emails and any way in which you can provide us information. We're happy to take it in. Thank you.